Okay. Thank you, Zita and Henrietta. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our participants joining us across the continent and the globe. On behalf of the African School of Regulation, ASR, and the African Forum for Utility Regulators, AFUR, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on tariff determination techniques and subsidy design in utility regulation. Electricity tariffs and subsidies are critical policy tools that shape access, affordability, and financial sustainability of power sector in Africa. Many African utilities face the challenge of balancing cost-reflective tariffs with social and political imperative of affordability. Today, we aim to explore the delicate art and science of designing tariffs and subsidies that protect vulnerable consumers without distorting the market. For today's webinar, this is how we would proceed. We would have a welcome address from our director, Dr. Shetima, and that from the executive secretary or a rep from AFUR. After that, I would introduce our distinguished panelists. Then we zoom into a guided conversation. After that, we would have structured, we'll open the floor for your questions, but as we proceed, listeners, you can submit your questions using the Q&A function in the webinar dashboard. Please try to be specific with your question and I'll try my best to get all your questions answered. So first, let me start with our director, Dr. Shetima, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Crispin. And on behalf of the African School of Regulation, I warmly welcome you all to this ASR AFUR webinar on tariff determination techniques and subsidy design in utility regulation. As Crispin mentioned, balancing tariffs and affordability is not an easy task for regulators, but getting this balance right is essential not only for expanding access, but also for strengthening public trust and regulatory credibility. We all know if tariffs are too high, consumers would start stealing electricity more, or there will be a lot of resistance. Some would go off grid, especially with the advent of solar and other means of electricity generation, self-electricity generation, which again puts pressure on the utilities and the remaining consumers. And if tariffs, on the other hand, are not cost-reflective, investments will not flow. So getting this balance is really essential. At the ASR, we see tariff and subsidies design as more than just a technical exercise, as they are instruments of equity, efficiency, and sustainability. Today's dialogue brings together seasoned practitioners who will help us unpack the economic, social, and political dimensions of tariff regulation and share practical insights from across the continent. I wish to thank our partner, the African Forum for Utility Regulators, for co-organizing this crucial event, and to appreciate our distinguished panelists for sharing their expertise. Finally, I thank all participants for joining us today, and I encourage you to engage actively, learn, and share experiences that can help shape better regulatory outcomes for the Africa's power sector. Thank you, and I wish us all fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Shetima. Now let's take a word from AFUR.
Thank you very much, Crispin. I hope everyone can hear me. This is Samuel Sebabunya from the African Forum for Utility Regulators, representing our Executive Secretary, Madame Debbie Roots, who's going to be a bit late, but she will be joining and will offer the closing remarks. Please do not fear. I am offering her opening remarks, or our opening remarks, as the African Forum for Utility Regulators on this. It's our second webinar together with the African School of Regulation. So it's important for us to really share such memorable events, such memorable news, and also learnings with the rest of the African continent, most especially around things to do with tariff. Like Dr. Shetima from ASR, who are very ardent partners of the African School of the African Forum for Utility Regulators, has just said, tariffs are a big and important bit when it comes to the energy sector in Africa. As long as the tariffs are high, as long as the tariffs are non-sustainable, it becomes difficult for us to provide energy to those people who don't have energy. And even those who have energy, it's very easy for them to simply walk away and engage in acts like Dr. Shetima has highly and appropriately elaborated on. The fact still remains that as we engage in the energy sector on the continent, we need to learn more about tariffs, and there is a quite distinguished table of panelists, and they will share their expertise, their ideas. So please feel free to ask them the multiple number of questions that you have about this subject. They are very highly experienced when it comes to regulation, so I'm sure that they will provide you with each and every single thing that you need to understand when it comes to tariffs. Once again, welcome, and we urge you to be as open-minded as you possibly can to everything that you hear and learn in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. And on that note of being open-minded, so I'll proceed to introduce our panel. So first, we have Mr. Penhas Mutota, who is the Executive for Economic and Market Regulation at the Electricity Control Board in Namibia. With over 20 years of experience in the electricity regulation, he has profound expertise in the Namibian and Southern African electricity markets. Second is Engineer Dr. Frank Bunyaseboa, who is a mechanical engineer with expertise in power utility regulation, as well as manufacturing industry in Uganda and Africa in general. He is a certified utility regulation expert and a public-private partnership expert with more than 25 years of high-level leadership, senior management, and consultancy experience. Third on our list is Mr. Herbert Isaac Cabri, who is the Director of Economic and Tariff Studies at ARSE in Burkina Faso. He is an engineer and a statistician by training and a specialist in financial modeling. His work focuses on designing tariff methodologies, evaluating necessary subsidies, and maintaining financial balance among electricity sector actors. And the last on our list is Dr. Ibrahim Tajuddin, who is the head of tariff and charges with the Economic Regulation Division of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC. He is a trained energy economist with several years of experience working in the regulatory sector. Our panel represents a powerful combination of economic rigor, regulatory insights, and on-ground implementation experience. We welcome you all and thank you for sharing your time and expertise with our audience today. As for our audience, we have a French translation and at the same time an English translation. So one of our panelists will be speaking French. So when it's his turn, that is Mr. Herbert Isaac Cabri. When he's speaking French, you can switch to the English channel using the button to your right. So you can switch to listen to him in English using that button. Okay, now so let us zoom in to our main discussion. Let me start with Engineer Dr. Seboa with our first question. So, Engineer Doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, I do hear you, and thank you very much for kind words about me. Yes, I'm Frank Seboa. I used to be a regulator some time back, and I worked with AFUR. This is a great opportunity to work with the African School of Regulation, my first time, and it's always a pleasure. My understanding of what we are trying to do is to see how to get more energy onto the grids, more energy into the countries. And to do that, there are quite a few things which one must do. But first and foremost, you must have the energy, the power to use. And how you say it will depend on a few things which I say. I didn't ask, how much time do I have for this first bit? Crispin, how much time?
So I would give you 3 minutes.
3 minutes
for your introductory. Yes, for your introductory words.
Okay, thank you. The reality of the matter is that tariffs, while they are a good tool for both sides, the consumers and the developers, we must be careful, as the director there said, to balance this well. If the tariffs are too low, and I've seen it in my own country and in other countries actually, the investors won't come, and then we will not have the electricity to give out. On the other hand, if they are too high, the consumers won't be using it as they should. In fact, you may end up with political uproar. So you need to balance that. And I agree totally with him. I must say that in my past, I've dealt with the tariffs, and tariffs can be very tricky. The politicians or the country leaders don't like high tariffs when it's election time. When they've got into power, they want you to increase the tariff so that they are able to attract the investors. So it's a give and take thing, especially for the regulators. Are my minutes done? I heard you say something.
Yes, Dr. Seboa, if it is possible, can you turn on your camera for our audience while
Yes.
you proceed?
Oh, it's there. You can see the good old man. I was saying that in my life as a regulator, and I had 10 years of it, and subsequently I worked also in the generation side of electricity and so on, and I'm a consultant on renewable energy currently. But tariffs is the edge over which a sector can grow or not grow. I said before, if the tariffs are too high, the consumers will not use it as well, and in fact, they start agitation. On the other hand, if they are too low, the consumers, the investors won't come. Later on, I hope I get opportunity to show you how investors come, because you need electricity first. You need the investors first in order to give to the consumers. And Africa, quite a huge population has no access to electricity. So I hope I get opportunity to do that. But when you say 3 minutes, I don't know how to go about it. Maybe later on I will get another opportunity.
Certainly, you would get an opportunity. Let me come to Dr. Ibrahim Sajuddin. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Good. So we would like to hear from your introductory statements with respect to the most effective techniques regulators can use to ensure tariffs are cost reflective, yet being socially acceptable from your perspective, if in your introductory.
Okay, Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity given to me to be part of this discussion. And one of the critical parts or aspects of the power sector is tariff, especially for country where they have been able to unbundle the sector from what it used to be from the vertically integrated system. Tariff then play a critical part. If you have a power system that is still vertically integrated, pricing might not be so critical because the government take majority of the body and provide the operating costs of the business. But for the unbundled system, where you have a lot of private participation, both in terms of generation, distribution, and some aspect of transmission, then tariff plays a critical part, which for regulator, it's a very important mandate that they need to handle properly to balance two views. The first view is the view of the investors, which the first panelist rightly mentioned. Investors will not bring money into the business if they don't have the clear sight of recovery of their investments through tariff. And at the same time, the consumers are not able to pay, if the prices go beyond a certain threshold. So the role of the regulator then is to ensure how you then strike a balance. And in terms of striking balance is number one, to ensure that the cost that is being recovered by the investors, they are prudent costs, they are useful and useful, right? So that you are ensuring that you are not passing inefficiency. Then on the part of the consumer, you also want to ensure that what they are paying for, it's what reflective of the service they've been able to get, and also trying to identify the vulnerables, the people that are not able to pay those tariffs. How do you then try to see how you can come in form of subsidy design to support them and to ensure that they are not left out from the system? So, as a regulator, you have to ensure that this balance, is being properly taken care of by working with the government to ensure that there's adequate provision for subsidy. So as we go along the line, I will share further experience in terms of Nigerian context, how we have been able to manage this, and what we are doing also going forward to further address this issue. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Tajuddin. So I would note that I'll come back to you on that. But let me go to Mr. Penas from the Namibian experience. So, Mr. Penas, in what ways, how can regulators balance technical cost recovery principles with political and social pressures on tariff? If you listen to both Dr. Sebua and Tajuddin, they mentioned the influence of political and social pressures. So how can regulators balance the technical cost recovery principles with political and social pressures on tariff adjustments? And you can go ahead and give maybe some experiences from your site in Namibia or in the Southern Africa perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon. At least from where I'm sitting is afternoon. Perhaps I would just like to then start off by saying that different entities are established to carry out different objectives of government. This is now in respect to the electricity supply industry. So in respect of how these entities are expected to carry out their mandates, the regulator is supposed to regulate in the interest of all stakeholders to ensure that the customers are fairly protected, as well as the utilities in terms of are they then recovering the cost that they are then supposed to be recovering. At the end of also, overall, what we have is a policy. The policy is then set by government, And then that is what we should be able then to be implementing. So how do we then balance this? In terms of technicality and political balancing, when we then determine and calculate electricity tariffs, we know that a unit, this is how much it's costing, and this is how much a utility is then requiring to sustain its operations. However, because of certain social issues, then the affordability or the ability of the consumers will then dictate otherwise. So what we need to ensure as the regulators is then to have a clear position by government through a policy if the tariffs should be cost reflective. And if they are not cost reflective, then who is then going to cover the shortfall, and in what form is that going to be? So it will not serve any purpose if the regulator is then sort of determining a tariff at a certain level, where government is then also then indicating that tariff will not be implemented. So it is very important for the two parties, including the utility, to have an understanding of what can be implemented and what cannot be implemented. So that at the end of the day, when government is making a specific political statement, they will then also have an understanding of how much will that statement sort of cost them to ensure that the industry is sustainable. So that is probably where it will then lead us into speaking of subsidies, but that is, I think that we'll then touch on. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that it is the understanding of all parties in terms of what it is that they need to do, and continuous engagement from the regulator, specifically to the policymaker, and so that everybody is aware of what is happening.
Great. Thank you for that. Let me go to Mr. Herbert Fabry for his side. Mr. Herbert, on the same question for Mr. Penas, if you can give us your perspective on how regulators can balance technical cost recovery principles with political and social pressures on tariff adjustment. So let me get that from your side. You can give us perspectives from Burkina and any other area you have some experience or expertise in.
Merci beaucoup pour cette opportunité qui nous est donnée d'échanger sur les questions tarifaires. Ils sont réellement une question centrale parce que aujourd'hui, pour pouvoir attirer les investisseurs dans le secteur de l'électricité, la question tarifaire demeure une réalité centrale qui oppose le régulateur, le gouvernant et les investisseurs. Alors, comment est-ce que les régulateurs peuvent équilibrer les principes techniques de récupération des coûts avec les pressions politiques, sociales sur les ajustements tarifaires? Je dirais que le régulateur doit garder en œil qu'il doit forcément déterminer la vérité des prix. Ça veut dire que les coûts réels dont l'investisseur a engagé pour pouvoir produire une unité de kilowattheure, le régulateur doit être en mesure d'appliquer cette vérité des prix, et en fonction du coût de production déterminé par le régulateur maintenant peut utiliser des mécanismes pour pouvoir inciter au niveau du tarif. Le régulateur doit pouvoir être en mesure maintenant d'utiliser des incitations pour permettre non seulement à la couche vulnérable de pouvoir bénéficier de ces services, de pouvoir payer l'électricité avec un montant peut-être qui est subventionné, et également le régulateur doit être en mesure, dans le mécanisme de la tarification, utiliser des méthodes pour concilier la compensation que l'État, le gouvernement va payer à l'investisseur du fait du maintien d'un tarif pour la couche sociale et aussi permettre à la frange qui ont les revenus quand même les plus élevés de pouvoir payer le tarif moyennant la vérité des prix. Donc, pour pouvoir concilier ces choses, premièrement, il est important pour le régulateur de pouvoir déterminer la vérité des prix. Et ensuite, avec les mécanismes maintenant de tarification où on peut inciter en utilisant des approches où les tarifs sont déterminés par tranche, ou lorsque on consomme plus, on peut être arrivé à payer le prix réel, le régulateur doit être à mesure de pouvoir déterminer cette grille tarifaire qui va inciter, par exemple, le gouvernement à accepter de pouvoir aider la frange la plus vulnérable à payer un tarif subventionné et aussi laisser aussi la latitude aux autres de pouvoir le faire. Par exemple, pour le cas spécifique du Burkina Faso, comme vous voulez qu'on en parle, il y a une réforme tarifaire, par exemple, que nous avons effectuée en 2023 qui a consisté, parce qu'il y a la question de la subvention qui était un peu généralisée, de déconnecter plusieurs consommateurs, notamment les banques, les institutions financières, les ambassades, qui bénéficiaient même de cette subvention-là, de la subvention qui a été octroyée. Donc, cette réforme tarifaire nous a permis, par exemple, de pouvoir déconnecter toutes ces structures-là de la subvention afin de pouvoir appliquer la subvention qui est ciblée vraiment à un secteur vulnérable plutôt qu'une subvention généralisée. Voilà un peu ce que je peux dire déjà d'entrée. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. And I believe we remember to switch to the English channel to listen to what Mr. Herbert said. Picking up from his side, so let me come back to Dr. Seboa. Mr. Herbert took us to the aspect of subsidy. So I want to pick up from that side. So Dr. Seboa,
Thank you.
If you can,
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. So what are some of the key considerations you would say regulatory institutions should consider for subsidies in their tariffs? What should be some of the things?
Yes, I give 2 examples first. The first one was in Uganda here, we had a subsidy experience where we needed to mitigate the cost of thermal power, which had joined the grid. So what the regulator did and negotiated hard with the government was that the subsidy amount, because getting rid of subsidies is difficult, the subsidy amount will be written on the bill. When you get your electricity bill, it says this is subsidy from government. Then when the government runs out of that subsidy, the subsidy from government will be 0, so that the regulator is not blamed for that. The other thing that we've tried, and I think it works very well, is to do a tariff that self-adjusts. Because normally the drivers of tariff, upward especially, are external to the system. Identify those and agree that if it goes up by a certain amount, the tariff will go up. If it comes down by a certain amount, the tariff will also come down. That has helped in that people know if the price of fuel, the price of something goes up or inflation of the country, then the tariff will go up. But if they come down, they wait, and when they look at their bill, the rate for the tariff has come down. I think that can be a solution for some regulators. Not all, because governments don't want to accept that the economy gets bad and inflation becomes terrible sometimes. The other thing that now you ask about subsidies, and personally, I hate subsidies because really the subsidies tend to benefit those who are well off. What do I mean? Or those who consume a lot of electricity, for instance. If I assume if I'm an industry and I consume 2 megawatts of electricity, and somebody else does about 1, when the subsidy is applied to the industrial consumers, you will find that the one who is doing better, who is richer, who has a bigger business, will get a big chunk of the subsidy money. But also, this applies even to domestic consumers. A rich man with fridges and things in his house, if he's given a tariff under domestic tariff, a lower tariff under domestic, you get embarrassed, because that one and the man who has 2 bulbs, the one of 2 bulbs probably uses half a kilowatt hour, and he gets a certain percentage of that. And the other one who uses 100 kilowatt hours gets the same percentage, but the quantum of what they get is bigger. Now, how do we use subsidies is key, and why we need subsidies. Because subsidies, while there are negative aspects, as I mentioned, and the other one I forgot, having worked with the regulator, with the investors at the Investment Authority, serious investors will avoid the market where you are depending on subsidies to keep the population happy. They would rather that you have a cost-reflective tariff. But we realize that not all countries have such investors. Therefore, some of the power will cost more than what the majority of people can afford. And therefore, we need maybe to introduce some level of subsidies. But I think when we've introduced the subsidies, the people should be told that this is a subsidy from government. And when we remove it, the people also should be told that the money which was subsidizing electricity has now gone to do 5 hospitals, for instance, or to do some rural roads or something like that. That way, there won't be any quarrels about subsidies. And definitely the self-adjusting tariff in our case works well. It has subsidies. Most times they are dropped out. The other thing to watch out about subsidies, once you introduce them to smoothen out the spikes of prices beyond what people can afford, to bring them down cannot be a once-off item. You need to take the subsidy slowly down over maybe a year or 2, while the tariffs go up to reach the level of the cost-reflective electricity supply. I want to stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me go to Mr. Pinhas on a similar question before I come to Dr. Tajuddin. So, Mr. Pinhas, so just on the same question, I would like to know from you some of the considerations that maybe from your side you consider in determining subsidies, and maybe in addition to that, if you can share with us some of the common pitfalls in the current subsidy design across Africa or in Southern Africa, if you have some information or knowledge on that.
All right, thank you very much. The consideration in terms of incorporating subsidies is that subsidies is something that we cannot necessarily run away from, specifically with the development or the level of our economic development. And also in terms of our governments, specifically Namibia, we have adopted a cost-reflective tariff methodology. This was then agreed, and it was passed as a cabinet decision that tariffs are going to be cost-reflective. However, what has happened over the years is that we have reached cost-reflective tariffs with the understanding and everybody's understanding that the tariffs must be cost-reflective. However, we have been getting pressure from the consumers that the tariff, in as much as it's cost reflective, it has become unaffordable. Now, when the tariff is unaffordable, the consumers are then requesting either the tariff must then be reduced. When the tariff is reduced, then it means that the utility is not getting the full cost of generating or supplying that electricity. Now, what do you then consider is that there are specific mechanisms that you can use, whether you are going to have subsidies that are cross subsidies that are between customer categories, where you are then perhaps isolating a specific category, which in some cases we refer to as pro-poor, or in our case we consider it, or we refer to it as a social category. So I think Dr. Sebo has mentioned it, is that you do not want to have a blanket for all, where you are just then giving a subsidy to everybody, or even those that do not need that subsidy. What you are going to do is that you are going to have your market distorted, and once that subsidy runs out, then you are going to have problems actually getting back to what you need. So you must have a targeted subsidy, which then targets specific customer classes. If you are then targeting a certain group, for instance, a household, how do you then, it must be implicit in terms of how do you want that group to be identified? Is it on the level of their income, or is it on the connection? In our case, we said any customer who is beyond a certain level of connection, it's a 15 circuit breaker, must be on prepaid, you are going to be subsidized. Who's going to subsidize? We are not getting an external subsidy, because government said we do not have money to fund this. So your subsidy is going to come from the other customers. So that went on for a while, until such time that the tariff just became a bit unaffordable. Then government at some point, then they will say, we will be able then to put in money to the utility to cover certain aspects, but it is then for everybody. It's not only for a specific customer. So when you are then considering a subsidy, what you should then do is that have a methodology in terms of identifying that customer category, have a plan in terms of where that subsidy is going to come from. If it's going to come from other customers, then that's fine, as long as you also know how much it is in terms of the additional revenue that you need to collect from them. If it's an external subsidy, then also understand how far and how long will it be maintained. In some other countries, everybody gets, for instance, free electricity at some point. It doesn't matter now whether Phineas works for the regulator and can afford, but you are also included. So is that a fair way of then giving a subsidy? And when you are giving such a subsidy to a free electricity to everybody, what about those that do not have access? Are you then going to have to give them free candles, or maybe paraffin for lighting, for instance? So those are some of the things when you are designing your subsidies, have it written down, know where the funds are coming from, and also how much it is, and classify who are you targeting, so that people do not unnecessarily benefit while they should not be benefiting. And the pitfalls that I have noted is that cost reflective tariffs is a necessary tool. I mean, most of the colleagues have mentioned that it is necessary for investment, for private investment. If you continuously suppress the tariffs, and the tariffs are not reflective of the cost, what you are doing is that you are running your infrastructure and industry into the ground until such time that you are unable then to get out. The industry will not be able then to support new investment in terms of generation, transmission, and distribution. And the consumers should understand that. Let me end there for now. But I just wanted to emphasize that pitfalls that a lot of us do is that unnecessarily suppressing the tariff and not allowing the tariff to send the correct signal. The example of Uganda, where they said, when government comes in, we will indicate on your bill that this is how much they subsidized it. If it's not there, this is the true cost. I think that is actually an excellent idea, so that the consumers understand that electricity as a kilowatt hour is equally as a commodity that costs money to bring to our businesses and the household households, in as much as it is also necessary to propel and enhance economic development. It is also equally important that that unit is produced at a level where it is then its costs are covered. Let me end there for now.
Thank you, Mr. Penas. Let me pick a question from participants before we. So this one, let me give this question to Dr. Tajuddin. So this is a question from Mchebo Sefaleni. So the question is, do cross-subsidization models exist that subsidize off-grid electricity, that's from mini-grids and standalone systems coming from grid customers? Let me take the question again. Do cross-subsidization models exist that subsidize off-grid electricity from mini-grids and standalone systems coming from grid customers? Dr. Tajuddin, did you get the question? Is it clear?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I get the question.
Okay.
Yes, I get the question clearly. Yeah. So the person that asked the question is asking whether the grid customers can provide cross-subsidy for the off-grid customers. That is a cross-subsidy. So I would say that it depends on the country or the way it is designed, right? When it comes to tariff, the regulator may have the liberty to do some kind of adjustment. But in Nigerian context, for instance, for the off-grid, usually the mini-grid and co, what we have in most cases is called the implicit subsidy. Okay, that I can say generally there are three types of subsidy. We have the implicit subsidy, we have the explicit subsidy, and we have the cross subsidy. Implicit subsidy in the sense that where government indirectly subsidize the cost of production. For instance, in Nigeria, being one of the major producers of gas, okay, so there is a specified price of gas for the power sector, which is relatively lower than the competitive or the market price. So that is a form of subsidy, okay? Then there's explicit subsidy. Explicit subsidy is where there is a budgetary provision, where utility is only allowed to, utility under recover, and the government make a budgetary provision to cover the gap. So again, we also have something like that in Nigeria. Then the cross subsidy in the sense that where certain class of customer, pay higher than another group of customer based on certain criteria. So then, some class of customers subsidizing the other. Also, we have that in our system. So, but the question, in Nigeria, relating to the off-grid, what we have largely is implicit. We have an agency which is responsible to provide some kind of interventions to mini-grid developers, where they provide some kind of grants or finance at a low cost, so thereby reducing the cost of generating electricity from the off-grid, and thereby providing some kind of a subsidy in a way to the consumer. Now, again, I also mentioned that depend on the scenario or what the regulator intends to achieve. If a particular utility provider is also going into off-grid for certain solutions, right? There is also a possibility that you can have some off-grid customers subsidizing the or I mean the on-grid subsidy off-grid, because if it's the situation where all the customer belongs to a single utility provider, right? And the revenue requirement of the utility provider is determined by looking at the aggregate cost, both in terms of the off-grid solution that you may have provided and the grid energy that you're taking. So you can design the tariff such that the off-grid customer under that utility provider can still get subsidy from the the on-grid customer. So it depends on the financial what's it called framework that the utility is provider. But in a situation where it's a different entity that is providing the off-grid solution. So in Nigeria, most times the subsidy funding is coming from a different agency, not necessarily the on-grid customers. So, but again, let me also move further to talk about some of the things that my co-panelists have mentioned in terms of how to manage subsidy, right? Which is one of the key things in Nigeria, like something that we have really struggled with for a very long time, and we are trying as much as possible to see how we can effectively manage subsidy. Subsidy in itself is not a bad thing, but the question is who benefits from the subsidy and how is it being implemented? Those are the two key questions. And from my earlier explanations, I mentioned that the three subsidy that you can talk about, we have it. And that kind of gives some kind of imbalance where the people that are not supposed to benefit from subsidy are getting subsidy. So, but the act, that kind of unbundled the power sector in Nigeria has made provision based on the recent revision that was done for an arrangement where you have a system that the people that will benefit from subsidy, there will be the people that they are the less privileged people who actually need it through a fund that is called the Power Consumer Assisted Funds. So that fund will be created where the government will be making, budgetary provision, and some certain class of customer, like eligible customers or some big customers, will also make some, contribution into that fund. And so what the regulator would then do is that he would design a tariff system that all customers will pay the cost-effective tariff. So for the the less privileged one who require support, in terms of the subsidy, will apply to access the fund to then, subsidize their energy bill. So in so doing, during the application, you have to disclose some of your personal information that has to do with your income level, your expenditure level. And so if we are able to manage this will help to solve some of the problem in the sense that the people who don't deserve it will not come forward to access the fund because there are certain information that will need to be disclosed, which ordinarily they will not want to disclose. So this is one of the ways we are intending to use to manage the subsidy, which we are working assiduously with the government to see how we can activate this provision in the Electricity Act in Nigeria in terms of effective management of the subsidy. But at the moment, what we do, pending when we activate that fund, we engage the government, the policymaker with the different options that they will be able to see which one will be less destructive for them in terms of political support. So by giving them these options, then we'll be able to they'll be able to select which one is less destructive for them. And as a regulator, you then go ahead to implement those kind of policy action. So again, the whole summary of my analysis is that subsidy itself is not bad, especially if it is targeted towards the needy, the underprivileged and the people that are deserving of it, and the principle or the method in which the subsidy is applied, so that you don't create inefficiency in the system, and at the same time you don't send away investors, people who want to recover their cost of their investment. So those are the response that I have, at the moment. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Tajuddin. So let me come to Mr. Herbert. on a similar question regarding the subsidy. So if you can just pick up from where Dr. Tajuddin left off, I would like to know how can regulators improve on targeting, subsidy targeting in order to reduce fiscal leakage? And maybe if you have some practical examples from Burkina or from the sub-region that you can share with our participants.
Non, bon, c'est pour réduire un peu les fuites fiscales en termes de subventions, il est important d'abord de savoir à qui est destinée cette subvention. Et généralement, la subvention telle que c'est conçu dans les pays, c'est pour la couche vulnérable. C'est-à-dire les ménages souvent qui n'ont pas assez de revenus pour pouvoir avoir un minimum de confort dans l'énergie. Donc, il est important de pouvoir connaître la cible et lorsque le régulateur arrive à déterminer quelle est la cible dont le montant de la subvention est déterminé, en fonction maintenant des incitations tarifaires, on peut maintenant orienter cette subvention-là vers cette cible-là. Par exemple, au Burkina Faso, quand vous prenez par exemple notre grille tarifaire, vous allez voir que le tarif social est destiné uniquement aux ménages qui ont une installation électrique de 3 ampères maximum. Au-delà de 3 ampères, si vous allez entre 5 ampères, 10 ampères, 15 ampères, vous n'êtes pas sur la tranche sociale et il y a aussi des tranches de consommation. Plus vous dépassez les tranches, plus votre facture d'électricité augmente. Donc, ce mécanisme-là a été trouvé pour au moins protéger cette couche vulnérable-là. Quoique, ça comporte un peu des insuffisances parce que déjà, beaucoup se diront déjà qu'il y a quand même d'autres personnes aussi qui auront tendance aussi à vouloir bénéficier de cette subvention-là. Mais les solutions qui sont envisagées, qui sont envisageables, c'est surtout d'avoir quand même une base de données sur ces données-là, ces informations concernant cette couche vulnérable-là. Ça veut dire que si vous avez, par exemple, une base de données ou si vous essayez de construire une base de données sur la base de cette couche vulnérable, vous pouvez arriver aussi à mieux cibler cette subvention-là. Un peu au Maroc, par exemple, je pense que là-bas, ils ont déconnecter carrément la subvention liée à l'électricité et il y a un montant forfaitaire qui est octroyé aux ménages vulnérables via une carte qu'on appelle carte énergie qui est donnée chaque mois aux ménages vulnérables pour pouvoir bénéficier des services énergétiques. Par contre, chez nous, au Burkina Faso, quel mécanisme nous avons trouvé? Vous savez que quand vous prenez par exemple l'opérateur historique qui est l'opérateur par excellence qui a plus de nombre d'abonnés et qui a l'extension du réseau considérable, le centre de coût le plus élevé, c'est le combustible pour faire fonctionner les centrales thermiques. Donc, le mécanisme que nous avons trouvé pour pouvoir octroyer la subvention à l'opérateur historique, c'est que chaque année, nous essayons d'analyser les comptes prévisionnels de l'opérateur historique et nous essayons de trouver le prix du combustible qui puisse permettre à l'opérateur d'être à l'équilibre. Et c'est ce prix combustible-là qui est utilisé maintenant pour demander à notre Société nationale des hydrocarbures de pouvoir permettre à cet opérateur-là de payer le combustible pour faire fonctionner ces centrales thermiques-là à ce coût pour rester à l'équilibre, pour ne pas que la couche vulnérable, ceux qui consomment les 3 ampères, puissent connaître une hausse tarifaire. Donc voilà un peu le mécanisme que nous avons trouvé. Il y a aussi d'autres mécanismes. Je pense que si on prend l'exemple par exemple du Kenya, où les panélistes aussi l'ont dit tantôt, il y a un mécanisme où les plus riches payent pour les plus pauvres. Ça veut dire que le régulateur peut faire en sorte que le plus riche paye la vérité des prix et la couche vulnérable va pouvoir payer le montant du kilowattheure qui est subventionné. Donc, voilà un peu des bribes de solutions qui peuvent être proposées pour permettre quand même de pouvoir éviter que la subvention ne puisse aller de gauche à droite ou ne puisse pas permettre quand même d'atteindre l'objectif lié au montant de la subvention. Je m'arrête là pour l'instant. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Herbert. So let me pick some questions from our participants. And I would, because of time, I would spread it across our distinguished panelists. So the first one from Ubong, I think it's a comment. I am thinking that subsidies are for the vulnerable or poor consumers and not applied across board. So I think it's a comment from Ubong. The second one is from Abraham, Sahir Abraham. Abraham is the Director of Renewable Energy from the Office of the President of Republic of Sierra Leone. And his question is, are there efforts made towards tariff harmonization at regional level and in the long term across the continent on energy access for households? So I would just put this across, starting from Dr. Seboa, if you can pick this, and maybe Mr. Pinhouse too. You can have a take on this one too after Dr. Seboa.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid the question you didn't explain it enough for me. However, I have something to say. Everybody here is saying that subsidies are for the vulnerable, the poor. That is not correct. In a country like mine, when 60% of the people have no access to electricity at all, how can you tell me that of the 40, you will pick 10%? The 40 who already have, you pick 10% and subsidize those. But now go ahead and repeat the question so I don't take everybody off guard.
Dr. Seboa, you were developing a point. If you can just finish with that, then maybe this question Mr. Pinhouse will pick up.
Okay.
Will pick it up.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, I have even an issue with the subsidies because some of the subsidies are indirect. I tell you that in my country, the government decided that for large consumers of electricity, the tariff would be a certain amount, 5 US cents or something like that. And the regulator worked hard to get it to that, but it means somebody else missed that money, which is now going to the large industries. However, they justified it, missed that. What I want to raise to the forum is, we've all talked about how the regulator can do X, Y, Z, but lobbying the politicians and especially government for a buy-in on whatever subsidies we are talking about is something that gives regulators nightmares, because you must go to the minister, sometimes you've got to go to the president or head of government to ensure that they get a buy-in on your subsidy arrangement. But as I say, I think subsidies are bad. They bring inefficiencies in the system. If you subsidize a consumer who would have used 5 units, like in the case of Uganda and Namibia, at some stage we said 15 units, you pay this rate. That man, maybe using his own resources, would have used 5 units. Now, because you say up to 15, then he'll go into waste, and waste is an inefficiency within the system. I want to stop there at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So let me give this question to Mr. Pinas. So the question is, are there efforts made towards tariff harmonization at regional level and in the long run or in the long term across the continent on energy access for households? Is it something you?
Thank you.
That one I can, yes, I can definitely talk about that. Though all the power pools we hear about are aimed at really getting some supply of electricity under some harmonized terms. And I think the answer is really that. I don't know the success of that harmonization, but I know in the Southern Power Pool, the harmonization on how the electricity is supplied and so on is driven hard. The East African Power Pool itself, the West African one. So I think they are there, the efforts are there. It's the level of success, which in my opinion is a bit slow. It takes a long time to convince again the politicians who have not yet addressed here as key in our work. They may not necessarily tell you give this tariff, but they are key to agree to whatever we are saying and doing here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Penhas, you can have a bite on that. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, first, I think also in terms of subsidy, before I come to the question on the possibility of harmonizing the tariffs. What we have, when we developed our support tariff mechanism, how we have classified it is that a customer only qualify to be on the subsidized tariff if they meet specific requirements. That first requirement is that you must be connected to a 15 M circuit breaker or below, meaning that this is sort of a self-disqualification. So if you have more equipment that you need to use, then a 15 M circuit breaker will not be able to work for you. That is how we manage then to categorize those that can then participate. Because otherwise, everybody could then participate. Of course, this is also taking away from people that should not be on that category. Then the second thing is that you can only qualify up to 200 kilowatts per month. The first 50 units, and here we are not speaking of entirely free electricity. So the first 50 units is priced at generation cost, and we also make it aware to the consumers that what you are paying for is generation, and you are being subsidized on transmission and distribution. The next 150 units is on generation and transmission, meaning that you are only then being subsidized on the distribution. If you breach the 200, then the 201st unit is then charged on the full retail tariff. This, in a way, we thought of also giving a tariff signal to the consumers so that they understand what they pay. Coming to the question of harmonizing, are there efforts toward tariff harmonization at a regional level across the continent on energy access for households? Different countries have different policy objectives in terms of how they want their developments to go. If then the continent or regions are sort of aligned, this could help. But you can imagine Namibia is probably reliant on renewable energy, which is basically hydro and some solar PV and wind, with the majority of it being imported. So now for us to determine our tariff, and we are at cost reflective tariffs. So now our consumers are probably paying a high tariff than our counterparts somewhere maybe in Zambia or Zimbabwe, where their majority of their electricity is maybe paid off hydro and coal and so forth. So now you are having a base that is misaligned to what we are having. But when you look at the markets that are being developed, being Southern Africa Power Pool, the West and so forth, integrating into the Africa single market, What is going to happen is that as long as then these generators start trading and then the tariff is set as one, then you are going to have a generation tariff that is determined by the market through these power pools, which is going to be similar. But then what is going then to be of difference is probably the cost of transmission and the cost of distribution, where you probably not see that it will be similar because Namibia is a vast country saving only 300 or 400,000 people, while other countries are small in size with a large population, and the economies of scale is much more higher than what you have in a country like Namibia. But the generation, you might find that in medium to long term, you will find that when we start trading at that level in terms of generation, it will come to the level where generation cost all over will probably be the same, but it will also depend in terms of what governments want with their local generation. Because if Namibia decides to build a generation that is government funded, then that tariff is not going to be in the tariff to the end consumers and vice versa. Thank you for that.
Thank you. We have quite a number of questions from our participants, so I'll try to pick from the top. We have two of them in French. Mr. Herbert, if you can see them, I'll try to do some bit of translation, but I'm sure you would get the questions first. So the first one, actually the two questions I think have been addressed previously, but let me just read them for you. The first one is, thank you for the experiences shared. Could you please indicate which subsidy mechanisms the regulator should take into account and which ones are the most effective? And the second one is, what are the main steps for identifying and classifying customers in your country in order to achieve the restructuring of the subsidy system? So let me give these two to Dr. Tajuddin and Mr. Herbert. So maybe Mr. Herbert, you go first, then Dr. Tajuddin will come in.
Oui, parce que c'est vrai que le débat est très passionnant et intéressant, et je pense que le temps même qui est imparti pour ces échanges-là vraiment insuffisant. Et mon souhait même est que l'African School of Regulation et AFUR puissent quand même revoir à quel moment on peut relancer, par exemple, ce débat qui intéresse pas mal de régulateurs africains, parce que la question tarifaire et la question de la subvention, c'est des domaines centraux qui exigent de nous que nous partageons les expériences des uns et des autres pour permettre de développer un peu ce domaine-là dans nos pays. Pour revenir un peu à la question, par exemple, chez nous, la solution qui a été trouvée à défaut d'une base de données, parce que la solution pour pouvoir avoir une subvention efficace, c'est vraiment une subvention ciblée et orientée vraiment couches vulnérables. Mais pour pouvoir avoir cette subvention ciblée, il faut aussi au préalable avoir une base de données de cette couche vulnérable-là. Maintenant, comment est-ce qu'au niveau du Burkina Faso, on a pu identifier cette couche vulnérable? Faute de base de données sur les revenus des ménages, parce que c'est des questions assez sensibles où les gens souvent ne veulent pas donner la vérité de leurs revenus. Nous avons essayé de canaliser la consommation à 3 ampères, parce qu'on estime qu'un ménage vulnérable a juste besoin de l'éclairage et d'un certain confort pour pouvoir bénéficier des services énergétiques. Donc, la subvention est calée sur la puissance le niveau d'abonnement qui est de 3 ampères, qui permet au gouvernement de voir que c'est un ménage social et d'orienter maintenant cette subvention-là vers cette couche vulnérables. Quoique, il y a d'autres méthodes qui peuvent permettre quand même de pouvoir identifier les couches vulnérables, notamment lorsque vous essayez de voir un peu le niveau de consommation, avec aussi des données à collecter telles que un peu le confort même du ménage. On peut arriver quand même à identifier les ménages vulnérables, mais on a essayé de cibler et il y a des projets aussi au sein du Burkina Faso qui permettent aux ménages vulnérables de bénéficier d'un coût d'abonnement assez bas pour leur permettre d'avoir accès à l'énergie. Excusez-moi, l'autre question c'était, je vais regarder rapidement, excusez-moi. Je pense que j'ai répondu aux deux questions en même temps parce que la seconde, c'était quelles sont les principales étapes pour l'identification et la classification de la clientèle opérée dans votre pays. Eh bien, au Burkina Faso, on a classifié un peu les clientèles là avec le niveau de consommation. Voilà un peu ce que je peux dire. Merci.
Okay, thank you. So let me come to Dr. Tajuddin, the same question, if you can share your views on that. So
Okay,
should I take the question
thank you
again?
very much. Thank you very much once again. The question, yes, please do that, please.
Okay. Yeah, so the question is on, could you please indicate which subsidy mechanism the regulator should take into account and which ones are the most effective? And the second one is the main steps for identifying and classifying customers in your country in order to achieve the restructuring of the subsidy system.
Okay, so just two questions.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you can just
again,
combine the
like I
two
said earlier
questions,
in my
yeah.
presentation that yes, like I said in my earlier presentation that depending on the environment and the policy direction of the government, then determine what kind of subsidy that a regulator can use. And I did identify that currently in Nigeria we have three forms of subsidy, which is the implicit, explicit, and the cross subsidy, right? And all these, almost all class of customer benefited, right? But the challenge we have, particularly with the explicit subsidy, where there must be a budgetary provision that the government will then pay, to the utility to be able to pay the service provider, including the generation and transmission. So that budgetary provision is not forthcoming, which is one of the key challenges that is, constituting a major setback for the sector. So as a regulator, in a way to address that problem, so what we are proposing in line with the Electricity Act is that, budgetary allocation should be made and go into a specific fund where any individual customers that want to apply for subsidy can do so. And certain criteria will be set depending on probably your income level, your consumption, and co. And in that case, all consumers will pay the cost-reflective tariff. So if you then want to assess the subsidy, you assess that by applying to the fund, to offset your energy bill. So that is, the way forward to address the challenge of delay funding and delay payments by the government. Now, in terms of the class of customer, currently what we have a class of customer that is based on consumption level, which benefits subsidy, and which is similar to what my colleague from Namibia was saying. If a customer consumes not more than 50 kilowatt hour in a month, it pays certain amount of tariff which is highly subsidized. Now, the other part is a function of the service level that is delivered to customers, right? Where if you are able to get a service up to certain level, maybe 20 hours on the average in a day, this is the amount of tariff you pay. There's another class of customer that if your service level is no more than 16 hours, and if your service level is no more than 12 hours, if your service level is no more than 8 hours, then 4 hours respectively. So the tariff is designed along that line. And so what government has done currently is that for the higher band, which is the customer that are able to get up to at least 20 hours of service in a day, majority of those customers in that categories pay the cost-effective tariff. Okay, while the customers that on the lower band, where they get not up to 20 hours, maybe 16, 12, depending on your class, still enjoy some level of subsidy. So it's a gradual process. So the engagement with the government now is to see how we can move further down, such that the class of customer where they get up to 16 and 12 hours can also pay the cost-effective tariff. So that's the gradual process. And if you remember in my earlier comment, I did mention that one thing about politicians in terms of how you handle them, to ensure that the burden of subsidy is not harmful for the sector and how to minimize it, is to give them options. To give them options, and the timing too is very, very important, particularly when they are close to election period. They are not willing to do anything. So you give them options, on time. You do engagement. You follow. And you will be able to secure policy rate design as a regulator. So of customer class and how customers assess or get a benefit of subsidy. But ultimately, where we are going is to have a central arrangement where government provision, budgetary provision, as well as certain class of customer will contribute, and any consumers who intend to access subsidy will then apply to this fund. But in terms of payment, you have to pay the cost-effective tariff. And so if you think you are not able to pay, you need some support, then you apply to the fund to be able to benefit of the subsidy. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Let me pick this question from my director, Dr. Shetima. I think I would pass it on to each for a minute if we can all respond to it. So in your respective jurisdictions, do you find that many officials within legislative, policymaking, or regulatory institutions view cost-reflective tariffs as capitalist notions that harm consumers and therefore should be rejected? If so, how do you engage with or address this mindset? So I'll pass it on to each for a minute, if we can respond, starting with Dr. Seboa, if you can start.
Yes, when I was a regulator, actually, that sentiment from especially members of parliament was prevalent, that these subsidies, not that they are anti-people, that they wanted more subsidies to the people because they did not understand that subsidies is money which comes from somewhere. And to deal with it is really a tricky thing. I made many trips to parliament to explain to them that subsidies is the money that comes from somewhere. And when you subsidize, sometimes you lose even other money like taxes and so on, which need to be covered. So it's a problem. I don't think it has gone away. People in parliament always believe that we should subsidize the people. But the investors think that maybe we should have cost-reflective tariffs. But it's a question of explaining to the people, to members of parliament, people in the government about the cost of subsidies. Thank you very much.
Mr. Penas?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yes, cost reflectivity is not a concept that a politician would want to hear. And electricity in itself, a lot of us think that it should be a social responsibility or a commodity that should be given either for free or at a very minimal cost. So there are those that still think that this notion is a capitalist notion, that the utilities are just there to make money out of the consumers and that the consumers cannot afford. But this issue goes beyond just the tariff itself. Government, the same government, if it can create opportunities for everybody to be able to afford electricity, if it can create jobs so that people have an income, then you will probably not have a problem with that. But at the moment, that is where the problem is. The other issue is also that at the same time, while government is putting in effort to build other sort of infrastructure such as roads, water schemes, and so forth, a lot of our governments are probably not putting in enough funding to build generation capacity. Not only generation, but transmission and distribution as well. So how do we then go around it is that to address this mindset is to continuously engage and educate that electricity is a commodity that needs to be paid. If a unit of electricity that is not available, it's even more expensive than a cost-reflective unit of electricity. Meaning that if we then are not able to support our utilities to provide for us electricity, whether the money is coming from the customers or government, and if they are not in position to support this, then we are going to be in a much more difficult situation. And governments, which is there for the longest, and in most cases, the politicians and some of the policymakers are only in office for a few years. So I think Dr. Sebo have mentioned it. Let us continue educating and engaging so that it is an understanding that if people can only afford this, somebody must come in and pay for it. And if it cannot come from electricity consumers, let it come from the entire tax base of the economy, which means that government must then step in, and not on consumption level, but maybe on capital, where they are then going to fund generation plants, transmission networks, and distribution networks. Thank you.
Okay, for the sake of time, so let me pick some other questions for Dr. Tajuddin and Mr. Herbert. So this person has two questions. That is Annie, and her questions, or I guess that is a she. What are the most commonly used tariff determination methodologies in utility regulation, and how do regulators decide which one to adopt? Then the second question is that when government subsidies are not feasible, what other strategies can regulators or utilities adopt to ensure affordability apart from certain consumer groups supporting others? So let me pass this to Dr. Tajuddin, if you can pick this one up.
Okay, thank you very much once again. There are several tariff methodology that can be used for tariff determination, which the regulator, as in which they decide to adopt. Certain of them, including the price cap, the revenue cap. They can also decide to adopt what we call the internal rate of return. There are a couple of them depending on the jurisdictions and what is the objective of the regulator that can be used. But what is important, especially for us, is there are certain criteria that a tariff methodology must meet. Number one is the transparency. Number two, the methodology must be known and be published for everybody, both the investors and the customer to understand. There must be a proper engagement, before you adopt such methodology for use, and there must be a law guiding it. Once you adopt the methodology, you have to do a proper documentation to make it a law, such that whenever you are doing your tariff setting, you are working on the basis of law, and you ensure that such method is easy to understand, it's simple, and it has a clear objective. So those are the basic things that you consider when you are adopting a tariff methodology. Now, the second question the person asked, which I have touched earlier on it, that the usual one, which is the major challenge, is the explicit subsidy, where the government has agreed for the utility to under recover, and they will pay the difference, which means for the utility to charge a tariff that is not cost reflective, and the government will be paying the difference through budgetary allocation. But in most cases, the money is not forthcoming, and this is what we have currently in Nigeria now. There's a backlog of funds, supposedly for subsidy, which is yet to be paid, and the generation company at some point they are threatening to shut down. So the government is, trying to come up with ways in which they can be able to pay all the outstanding subsidy provisions using different instruments, including raising bonds and co to be able to clear those funds. And so for us as regulator, we believe that this is not sustainable. It will get to a point where the generator might shut down if you're not paying them. And so that is where we're saying that what we want from the government is to activate the provisions of the Act that is governing electricity production, distribution, and transmission in Nigeria, which says that there must be a fund that must be created. And once the fund is created, government can make a budgetary allocation of provisions inside that fund. The regulator can also identify certain class of customer that must also contribute, depending on maybe eligible customer and co. And in so doing, whoever wants to assess or want to seek for subsidy as a customer, then you can apply to the fund to get a subsidy, but you must pay a cost-reflective tariff, right? You pay the cost-reflective tariff so that utility can pay their bills, can pay transmission, they can pay generation. And so the inefficiency in the system can also be controlled. Like one of the panelists mentioned, when you subsidize, consumers seems to consume beyond the required threshold. They tend to be, wasteful and cool. But when you allow them to charge cost-reflective tariff, and you set conditions under which they can access subsidy, right? They will seem, to ensure that their consumption is being controlled. So that's one of the ways that we in Nigeria we're doing to ensure that we're able to use to control to manage subsidy, which is not forthcoming, is to activate the Power Consumer Assistance Fund and ask the government to make the contribution. And so if the contribution is not coming, then there's no subsidy, but everybody must pay the cost-reflective tariff. And so that is what we are working towards at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tajudeen. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and we have so many questions from our participants. If this webinar will be uploaded on our YouTube, and we can keep the conversation going on our social media, ASR on LinkedIn and other platforms. So your questions, you can direct some of the questions there, and I believe some of our panelists would try to go there and answer some of the questions for you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I will have to call in my director, Dr. Shetima, and Madam Debbie Roots, if they are around, to give us their closing remarks. Dr. Shetima?
Thank you very much, Crispin, and thank you very much to all our hosts and our panelists and participants. We are very grateful for the fruitful discussions and the engagement. I'm sure everyone must have learned one or two things, especially from the exchange of ideas in different jurisdictions. There is a lot more to be done. We have to ensure that we have tariffs in all African countries that reflect the cost of providing efficient service. I very much enjoyed the various views on how subsidies can, help ameliorate the impact on consumers. Whether the tariffs themselves, the building blocks of the tariffs and the subsidies, they must both be efficient because there are wastages in both tariffs and subsidies if they are not well managed. I think one takeaway I have from the discussions is that we have a lot more work to do in building people's capacity in tariff administration and subsidy management. So I look forward to further engagements with all of you, and I'm sure we'll be having courses that would look into the various issues that have been mentioned today in much more greater detail, so that we build the necessary capacity, not just among our regulators, but among policymakers as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shatima. So if we have rep, okay. Madam Debbie Roots.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Debbie Roots. I'm the Executive Secretary of the African Forum of Utility Regulators. And I want to thank everyone, as the Director has indicated already, but thank everyone for participating. I think we had 138 participants, which is really great. I really look forward to the collaboration between AFUR and the ASR. And I want to thank the panelists, especially for very insightful deliberations. And I agree with Mr. Cabre to have more of such webinars where we're not only having presentations, but these discussions, as we said, very insightful. I think it's, again, I'd just like to thank the panelists, Dr. Frank Saboa, Dr. Ibrahim Chadin from NERC, Mr. Phineas Mutato from ECB Namibia, Mr. Herbert Cabre from AREC Burkina Faso. So we all know how important tariff setting and design is in driving investment in the energy sector. And this was made very clear in these discussions. Very interesting to see the various opinions that came out, as well as the importance of the regulator's responsibility to reconcile and balance the cost-reflective tariffs with the realities of affordability of consumers and the revenue gaps of the utilities. So subsidies have always been a very controversial subject, but the panelists gave us much food for thought. And I think for me, the key takeaway was stakeholder engagement. It doesn't matter what we do, we need to keep engaging with the governments, utilities, and the consumers. Without that, nothing will be achieved. And again, I want to thank the ASR, all the participants, my team at AFUR, for their dedication, for the time that you've given for these webinars. We look forward to, please take note, I think it is the 2nd of December. We've had much deliberation of the dates, but I think it is the 2nd of December. I may be wrong. A very insightful...
December. 3rd December.
Oh, goodness, 3rd of December, you see. And I think that is on PPAs. Again, we've had much deliberation and change of dates. And then in January, we have another webinar on the, I think it's late in the day and my brain has gone on leave, but on a fit for purpose, regulation fit for purpose. So please make note, we will send out from ASR and from AFUR, we will send out notices and save the dates. But again, thank you very much. I know it is late in East Africa. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentations and our great appreciation to ASR for their support. So thank you, everyone. I wish you an enjoyable evening. Thank you. Okay, over
Thank
back
you,
to you.
Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you for yeah.
Thank you very much. And on that note, save the date for the next webinar, which will be on PPA. So that will be power purchase agreements in the context of utility regulation. It will be on the 3rd of December, same time, 1 p.m. GMT. So save the date for that particular webinar. And thank you everyone for participating, especially to our panelists for sharing your experiences. We greatly appreciate. Samuel, you have a comment. Please go ahead. Yes, Samuel.
I think there are a lot of people that have been registered as Samuel. I myself was registered as Samuel. So I think that may be a bit confusing.
Okay. The person's hand is up, so I was thinking that was Samuel. All right. Okay, thank you very much for participating and joining. We look forward to seeing you on the 3rd of December on our next webinar. Thank you very much.